What comes to mind when you hear the name Napoleon? Perhaps you picture a short man in a funny hat. Maybe you think of a powerful emperor who tried to conquer the world, or perhaps you know him as a brilliant general who won impossible battles. The truth is, Napoleon Bonaparte was all of these things and so much more. He was a figure of immense complexity, a man who rose from almost nothing to become the master of Europe. His story is one of breathtaking ambition, incredible genius, and ultimately, tragic failure. He is one of those rare people in history whose life was so dramatic, so filled with triumphs and disasters, that it feels more like a Hollywood movie than a history lesson. His influence is still felt today, in ways you might not even realize. The laws he created, the systems of government he established, and the military strategies he perfected have shaped our modern world. He changed the map of Europe forever. He inspired both intense loyalty and bitter hatred. To some, he was a hero, a liberator who brought order and progress after the chaos of the French Revolution. To others, he was a tyrant, a warmonger whose endless ambition cost millions of lives. Understanding Napoleon is not just about understanding one man. It is about understanding a pivotal moment in history when the old world died and a new one was born. This essay will take you on a journey through his incredible life. We will not just look at the dates and the battles. We will try to understand the man himself. What drove him? What were his dreams? What were his fears? We will explore his humble beginnings on a small island and follow his meteoric rise to the very pinnacle of power. We will stand with him on the fields of his greatest victories and witness the reforms that changed France forever. We will also walk with him through the frozen wastelands of Russia and stand beside him in his final, devastating defeat at Waterloo. This is the complete story of Napoleon. By the end, you will see why he remains such a fascinating and controversial figure over 200 years after his death. His life is a powerful lesson in what one person can achieve through sheer force of will and intellect. It is also a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the corrupting nature of absolute power. Whether you see him as a hero or a villain, one thing is certain. Napoleon Bonaparte was a giant of history who cast a long shadow over the centuries. His story is not just history. It is a timeless human drama of power, glory, and downfall. To grasp Napoleon's story, we must understand the world he was born into. Europe was dominated by monarchies and a rigid class system, but these old certainties were beginning to crumble. The French Revolution swept away the old order, unleashing political turmoil. For a young, ambitious military officer, this chaos was an opportunity. Napoleon was a product of the revolution, a hero who promised stability and victory. He promised to make France the greatest nation in Europe, and for a time he delivered. He represented the idea that a man could achieve greatness based on merit, not lineage. This is the story of how a revolution designed to end kings ended up creating an emperor. The life of Napoleon is a grand narrative, with a clear beginning, a dramatic middle, and a tragic end. Our journey will follow this arc, exploring the three distinct phases of his career. First, we will chart his incredible rise. This is the story of a young man with an unshakable belief in his own destiny, who seized every opportunity that came his way. We will look at his early life, his education, and the military genius he displayed during the French Revolutionary Wars. We will explore how he combined political cunning with battlefield brilliance to climb the ladder of power faster than anyone thought possible, culminating in him becoming the ruler of France at the young age of 30. Next, we will enter the age of the Napoleonic Empire. This is the period of his greatest triumphs and his absolute power. We will witness his coronation as emperor and examine the vast reforms he implemented, which modernized France and much of Europe. We will march with his legendary Grande Armée across the continent, from the deserts of Egypt to the plains of Austerlitz, his most brilliant victory. This section will explore Napoleon at his peak, the master strategist, the tireless administrator, and the emperor who held the fate of millions in his hands. We will analyze what made him so successful and why so many were willing to follow him into battle. Finally, we will confront his dramatic and catastrophic downfall. Every great story needs a powerful ending, and Napoleon's is one of the most memorable in history. We will investigate the fatal mistakes and miscalculations that led to his decline, starting with the disastrous invasion of Russia in 1812. We will see how the combined powers of Europe, learning from his own tactics, eventually united to bring him down. We will follow him into his first exile, his daring return, and his ultimate defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. This final act is a powerful study in hubris, destiny, and the agonizing consequences of flying too close to the sun. This structured approach will allow us to appreciate the full scope of Napoleon's impact. It is a story that is both deeply personal and globally significant. It's about one man's relentless drive for glory, but it's also about the birth of modern Europe. By breaking down his life into these key stages, the rise, the reign, and the ruin, we can better understand the forces that shaped him and the legacy he left behind. Prepare to explore the life of a man who, for a brief but dazzling moment, held the entire world in his grasp, only to see it all slip through his fingers. His is a story that continues to captivate, instruct, and warn us to this day. Napoleon Bonaparte was not born into French society. He was born on its periphery, on the rugged island of Corsica. This made him, in the eyes of many, an outsider. His family were minor Italian nobility, far from wealthy or influential. This environment shaped Napoleon, instilling in him ambition and a feeling that he had to prove himself. His Corsican accent made him an object of ridicule when he went to a military academy in mainland France. These experiences fueled a burning desire to dominate. He poured his energy into his studies, devouring tales of great commanders. His education at military schools was rigorous. This isolation only hardened his resolve. He excelled in subjects like artillery. He was driven by a need to overcome his disadvantages. When he graduated at 16, he became a second lieutenant. The established order of pre-revolutionary France offered him little hope. Little did he know that the social and political structure of France was about to be torn apart. The coming storm of the French Revolution would be the forge in which his destiny would be shaped. The outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789 was the single most important event in Napoleon's young life. It shattered the rigid, aristocratic world that had held him back and created a new one where talent and ambition, not birthright, could determine a man's fate. For a young, obscure officer like Napoleon, this was a golden opportunity. The revolution's principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity opened all doors to men of skill, regardless of their background. As thousands of aristocratic officers fled France or were purged from the army, a massive vacuum of leadership was created. This was the moment Napoleon had been waiting for, a chance to rise through the ranks at unprecedented speed. Initially, Napoleon's loyalties were torn. He returned to Corsica for a time, getting involved in the island's revolutionary politics and siding with the radical Jacobin faction. He dreamed of being a leader for Corsican independence. But a political falling out with Pasquale Paoli forced him and his family to flee to the French mainland in 1793. This event was a critical turning point. It severed his ties to Corsica for good and forced him to commit his future entirely to France. No longer a Corsican nationalist, he became a French patriot, a dedicated soldier of the revolution. He fully embraced the identity he had once felt ambivalent about, seeing France as the only vehicle for his towering ambitions. Back in France, the revolution was descending into the reign of terror, a period of extreme violence and political paranoia. While dangerous, this environment rewarded radicalism and decisive action. Napoleon, with his Jacobin sympathies, was well positioned to thrive. He authored a pro-revolutionary pamphlet, Le Souper de Beaucaire, which brought him to the attention of Augustin Robespierre, the younger brother of Maximilien Robespierre. This connection was invaluable. It demonstrated his political reliability and helped secure him a crucial military posting. He was no longer just another anonymous lieutenant. He was an officer with political backing in a time when political favor was a matter of life and death. The revolution did more than provide career opportunities. It fundamentally shaped his worldview and leadership style. It taught him the power of ideology and nationalism to motivate masses of people. He saw how a nation could mobilize its entire population for war, creating vast citizen armies more passionate than the professional armies of old monarchies. He learned to speak the language of revolution, to appeal to ideals of glory, honor, and national destiny. He was, through and through, a child of this new, violent, and dynamic age. The revolution had created the conditions for his rise, and he would soon show the world that he was its most brilliant and formidable student. 1793, the siege of Toulon transformed Napoleon into a military hero. The city had rebelled, welcoming British and Spanish fleets. The Revolutionary Army struggled, but Captain Napoleon Bonaparte arrived. Recognizing strategic flaws, he focused on high ground overlooking the harbor. His plan: bombard the enemy fleet from La Guillette. Despite hesitant superiors, his relentless energy won the day. Leading from the front, he inspired his troops. In December, his cannons unleashed a devastating barrage. The British and Spanish evacuated, and the Revolutionary Army captured Toulon. Napoleon was promoted to brigadier general. A rising star was born. Following Toulon, Napoleon crushed a royalist uprising in Paris with a whiff of grape shot, becoming a savior of the Directory. Rewarded with command of the Army of Italy, he transformed the demoralized troops. Napoleon promised them victory, glory, and riches, introducing innovative tactics based on speed and surprise. His revitalized army launched a lightning-fast offensive, winning battles at Montenotte, Lodi, Arcole, and Rivoli. Known as the Little Corporal, he shared dangers with his troops, earning their loyalty. In less than a year, Napoleon conquered northern Italy, forcing Austria to negotiate. His Italian campaign made him the most famous man in France, setting the stage for his rise to power. After victories in Italy and Egypt, Napoleon returned to France in 1799 to a hero's welcome. The political situation had deteriorated. The Directory was corrupt and unpopular. The economy was in shambles, threatened by foreign armies. The French people yearned for a strong leader. They saw that leader in Napoleon. Sensing opportunity, politicians plotted against the Directory, choosing Napoleon as a figurehead. But Napoleon was nobody's puppet. He intended to be in charge. The coup was set for November 9th. Napoleon was put in charge of troops. Accused of being a dictator, he was heckled. His brother Lucien saved the day, galvanizing the troops. Soldiers stormed the hall. Napoleon was appointed first consul, seizing the reins of France. Having gained power, Napoleon's first task was to govern more effectively than the revolutionaries. France was broken after a decade of revolution, terror, and war. Napoleon tackled these problems with relentless energy. His primary goal was to restore order, confidence, and unity. He established the Bank of France to stabilize the nation's currency. He reformed the tax system, making it more efficient. These measures quickly restored economic stability and confidence. Napoleon also sought to heal the deep social and religious wounds left by the revolution. Napoleon negotiated the Concordat of 1801 with the Pope. At the same time, he offered amnesty to most of the political exiles who had fled during the revolution. Under his leadership, France was transformed. In just a few years, Napoleon had brought France back from the brink of collapse. He had proven himself to be not just a military genius, but also a statesman. Perhaps Napoleon's most enduring achievement was not won on a battlefield, but forged in a committee room. This was the creation of the Civil Code, later renamed the Napoleonic Code. Before the revolution, France did not have a single unified set of laws. Napoleon saw this legal chaos as a major obstacle to creating a truly unified French nation. He wanted a single set of clear, logical, and accessible laws that would apply equally to every citizen everywhere. Beginning in 1800, he established a commission of brilliant legal experts to draft the new code. The Napoleonic Code, officially established in 1804, was a revolutionary document. It enshrined many of the most important principles of the 1789 revolution into law. It was a radical modernization of the law. Despite these serious shortcomings, the code's influence was immense. As Napoleon's armies conquered Europe, they brought the code with them. The Napoleonic Code remains the basis of civil law in France and dozens of other countries to this day. By 1804, Napoleon, as first consul for life, sought to solidify his power and establish a dynasty. Becoming emperor would place him on equal footing with Europe's monarchs, legitimizing his regime. A referendum established the French Empire with Napoleon as emperor. He would be Emperor of the French, a title suggesting power from the people. At his coronation, Napoleon took the crown and crowned himself. The message was clear. His power came from his own achievements. He was Napoleon I, Emperor of the French, challenging the old order of Europe. 1 year after his coronation, Napoleon achieved his greatest military victory, the Battle of Austerlitz. It showcased his strategic genius and the spirit of his Grande Armée. Facing a larger combined army of Austrians and Russians, Napoleon was at a disadvantage. He weakened his flank to lure the Allies into a trap. As the Allied columns moved, Napoleon attacked the weakened center. The French shattered the Allied lines, splitting their army. The victory was absolute. The Allies lost over 27,000 men. Austerlitz confirmed Napoleon's military supremacy in Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte is regarded as one of history's greatest military commanders, known for his revolutionary approach to warfare. He perfected a new system, relentlessly pursuing a single decisive battle, unlike the cautious warfare of the 18th century. Napoleon aimed to destroy the enemy's capacity to fight, believing their political will would then crumble. Speed was his primary tool, moving armies faster than opponents, often 30 miles a day. This was enabled by the Army Corps system, smaller, self-contained units that could march independently. Key to his strategy was the strategy of the central position, using speed to place his army between divided enemy forces, crushing them one at a time. On the battlefield, he would probe the enemy line, identify a weak point, and launch a decisive attack, often with a flanking maneuver. This combination of speed, deception, and concentration of force defined the Napoleonic Way of War. Napoleon's genius needed an instrument, the Grande Armée. Forged in revolution, it was made of citizens fighting for their nation and emperor. At its peak, it was a pan-European force. Organized into a flexible corps system, it campaigned effectively across the continent. Napoleon's marshals were talented and aggressive. His command and control system was more advanced than his opponents. The bond between Napoleon and his soldiers was the army's strength. They called him the Little Corporal with affection and awe. They would follow him to the ends of the earth. In 1812, at the height of his power, Napoleon made a strategic error. He decided to invade Russia after Tsar Alexander defied his continental system. To force Russia back in line, he assembled the largest European army ever seen. The Russian commanders retreated, employing a scorched earth policy. He finally got his wish at Borodino, just outside Moscow. He captured Moscow only to find it deserted. Fires engulfed the city, leaving his army with no shelter as the Russian winter began. Napoleon ordered a retreat, which became one of the great disasters in military history. Of the 600,000 men who marched into Russia, fewer than 100,000 returned. The Grande Armée was destroyed, signaling the beginning of Napoleon's end. After the disaster in Russia, Napoleon's enemies united against him. He was defeated and exiled to Elba in 1814. In a stunning move, he escaped and marched on Paris, regaining the throne. This period, the 100 Days, was Napoleon's final gamble. Europe mobilized to crush him. He aimed to defeat the British and Prussian armies separately in Belgium. The final showdown came on June 18, 1815, near Waterloo. Napoleon's assaults failed against Wellington's lines. The arrival of Prussian reinforcements sealed his fate. The French army dissolved, and Napoleon's career ended at Waterloo, leading to his final exile. At the core of Napoleon's leadership was a formidable intellect and vast ambition. He possessed an extraordinary capacity for work. His mind processed information with incredible speed and clarity. This allowed him to maintain control over his sprawling empire. This powerful intellect was paired with an unshakable belief in his own destiny. He saw himself on par with Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar. His leadership style was intensely personal and highly centralized. On the battlefield, this allowed for a unity of command and speed of execution. However, this self-belief also contained the seeds of his downfall. This intellectual isolation led him to make catastrophic miscalculations, most notably the invasion of Russia. His greatest strength eventually became his fatal flaw. Napoleon was a master of public relations long before the term was ever invented. He understood the importance of shaping public opinion and creating a powerful personal image. He was not just a general or an emperor, he was a brand. From the very beginning, he cultivated his public persona through army bulletins, masterfully crafted pieces of propaganda. This created a direct bond between him and the French people. This cult of personality was reinforced through art and symbolism. His image was everywhere. He adopted symbols of power, linking his reign to the glories of ancient Rome and the earliest French kings. The most powerful element of this cult was the intense personal loyalty he inspired in his soldiers. This bond was his greatest military asset. This masterful use of propaganda allowed Napoleon to maintain control even during his most difficult moments. When he was finally defeated, the entire imperial structure collapsed with remarkable speed. Napoleon Bonaparte embodies a fundamental contradiction. He was both an enlightened reformer and an authoritarian tyrant. He swept away feudalism, championed legal equality, and promoted talent. His Napoleonic Code became a model for legal systems worldwide. Yet, he was undeniably a dictator. He seized power, concentrating authority and suppressing dissent. This duality extended to Europe. Initially seen as a liberator, his armies spread revolutionary principles. His conquests inadvertently paved the way for modern nation-states. However, liberation came at the point of a bayonet, serving French interests. Ultimately, his rule fueled the nationalism that destroyed his empire. This complex legacy makes him a fascinating historical figure. Napoleon's reign was marked by both brilliance and brutality. His decision to reinstate slavery in 1802, especially in Haiti, reversed revolutionary progress and led to immense suffering. The Napoleonic Wars, driven by his ambition, cost millions of lives and devastated Europe. His armies conscripted entire generations, and his conquests brought harsh reprisals, as seen in Spain and the Middle East. Napoleon's pursuit of power often meant sacrificing Enlightenment ideals for personal gain. Even those closest to him were used as pawns, revealing a ruthless, manipulative side. The glory of his achievements was built on a foundation of human suffering, a legacy that cannot be ignored. After the disastrous Russian campaign, Napoleon's empire was fatally weakened. Sensing his vulnerability, former enemies united in the Sixth Coalition to bring him down. Despite raising a new army, Napoleon's forces were inexperienced and outmatched. The decisive defeat at Leipzig in 1813 forced a retreat and the loss of his empire east of the Rhine. In 1814, Allied armies invaded France, and even Napoleon's tactical brilliance couldn't save him. Paris fell, his marshals deserted him, and he was forced to abdicate. The era of Napoleonic dominance in Europe was over. Exiled to Elba, Napoleon watched as the unpopular Bourbon monarchy alienated the French people. Sensing opportunity, he escaped in 1815 and returned to France, rallying the army and reclaiming the throne without bloodshed. His return, known as the 100 Days, terrified Europe's leaders. The Seventh Coalition quickly formed to stop him. Napoleon, knowing war was inevitable, moved to strike the Allies in Belgium before they could unite. The fate of France, and his legacy, would be decided on the battlefield once more. The world braced for one final confrontation. At Waterloo, Napoleon's last gamble ended in disaster. Delays, tactical missteps, and the arrival of Prussian reinforcements doomed his army. The French were routed. Napoleon fled and abdicated again. This time, the Allies exiled him to remote St. Helena, far from Europe. There, under constant guard, he spent his final years dictating memoirs and battling illness. Napoleon died in 1821, closing the chapter on an era he had defined. His fall marked the end of revolutionary upheaval in Europe. Napoleon's legend grew after his death, inspiring movements and shaping politics for generations. His reforms, like the Napoleonic Code and centralized administration, endure in France today. Across Europe, his conquests dismantled old orders and fueled the rise of nationalism. He was both a modernizer and a despot, a creator and a destroyer. Napoleon showed how one individual's ambition could reshape the world, for better and for worse. His story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power. Whether hero or tyrant, his legacy still shapes the modern world. So we come to the end of our story, the epic tale of Napoleon Bonaparte. We have followed him from his humble beginnings to the very pinnacle of global power. We have stood with him on his greatest battlefields and witnessed the creation of his vast empire. We have also walked with him through the frozen wastelands of Russia and stood by his side at his final crushing defeat. His life was a whirlwind of ambition, genius, and ultimately, tragedy. He was a man who held the destiny of Europe in the palm of his hand. His story continues to captivate us 200 years later. Napoleon's impact on the world was immense and undeniable. He permanently altered the course of history. His Napoleonic Code shaped legal systems that are still in use today. He was a military genius whose strategies are still studied in war colleges. He leaves an indelible mark on the very fabric of civilization. The truth is that he was all of these things. He was the son of the revolution who became an emperor. To understand Napoleon is to grapple with these complexities. In the end, Napoleon Bonaparte was a true giant of history. The Europe we know now was forged in the crucible of his wars. He demonstrated the incredible power that a single individual can wield to change the world. For better or for worse, he was one of the principal architects of the modern era. What can we learn from Napoleon Bonaparte's life today? It's a timeless human drama filled with lessons about power, ambition, and leadership. Napoleon's ambition drove him to achieve incredible things, proving talent can overcome disadvantages. However, his story is also a cautionary tale about unchecked ambition. His relentless drive for power led to fatal miscalculations and ultimately his ruin. Ambition without wisdom can become a destructive force. Another key lesson concerns the nature of power. Centralizing all power in one person is incredibly dangerous. Finally, Napoleon's life forces us to consider the relationship between greatness and goodness. His legacy is forever stained by moral ambiguity. Napoleon's life remains one of history's most powerful lessons.